First contact gone wrong. High Administrator Vextal's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession as she reviewed the data before her. The crystalline display hovering above her desk showed readings that simply couldn't be correct. She adjusted her translucent sensory membranes, wondering if her perception filters needed recalibration. "Analyst Zinra," she called out, her voice resonating through the chamber's perfect acoustics. "Please verify these baseline readings for species 7249b. The younger Arxian glided forward on antigrav stabilizers, her iridescent scales shifting from a peaceful blue to an anxious green. "Administrator, I've triple-checked the readings. They are accurate." Vextal's upper eyes narrowed while her lower pair focused on the impossible numbers. "They routinely operate in gravity nearly 3 times our standard. Their endurance ratings exceed even the Croton war breeds. And their thermal tolerance range." She paused, mandibles clicking in disbelief. "This can't be right. They're pre-FTL. That's what makes them so fascinating, Administrator." Zinrad's scales rippled with excitement. "They achieved these capabilities through natural evolution, not genetic engineering or technological enhancement." The grand testing facility stretched for kilometers around them, a marvel of engineering floating in deep space where the Galactic Council evaluated emerging species. For 10,000 years, it had served as the gateway for new civilizations to join galactic society. Species were tested, categorized, and guided based on their capabilities. But these humans, they didn't fit any existing category. "Their ship will dock in 30 standard minutes," Zinra reported. "The Council selected them for the standard defense trial." Vextal's exoskeleton nearly cracked from tension. "The defense trial? That's meant for Category 2 species at minimum. These humans are barely Category 4 by technological standards. The Council believes their unique physical capabilities warrant special consideration." Or perhaps, Vextal's vocal chambers produced a sound approximating a sigh. "The Council enjoys watching primitive species fail spectacularly." The arrival bay's massive doors parted precisely on schedule. Vextal and her team watched from the observation deck as the human vessel, primitive by galactic standards, maneuvered into position. Its hull showed signs of patches and repairs, its design prioritizing function over aesthetic appeal. "At least they managed to dock without incident," Vextal observed, "though I question the wisdom of accepting a species that still uses chemical propulsion for space travel." The airlock cycled, and Vextal felt her atmosphere processors fall momentarily. The humans were unsettling. They moved with an unnatural fluidity that seemed to defy their solid form, their bipedal stance both efficient and somehow predatory. 5 of them emerged, wearing what appeared to be surprisingly simple environmental suits. "Greetings, representatives of Earth," Vextal broadcast in standard galactic common. "I am High Administrator Vextal. Welcome to the grand testing facility." The human in front removed their helmet, revealing a face that seemed simultaneously fragile and fierce. "Commander Sarah Chen, Earth Defense Force. Thank you for having us." The human's voice carried an undertone that Vextal's translator tagged as amusement. "We've prepared the standard orientation protocol," Vextal began, but Commander Chen interrupted, a shocking breach of protocol that sent ripples of color cascading through Zinra's scales. "Actually, Administrator, if it's all the same to you, we'd prefer to proceed directly to the testing phase. We've studied your transmitted protocols thoroughly." Vextal's upper eyes blinked rapidly. "That's highly irregular. The orientation period is designed to allow species time to acclimate to your artificial gravity, atmospheric conditions, and basic facilities," Chen finished. "We're already acclimated. Your gravity is actually lighter than Earth standard, and your atmosphere is well within our tolerance range." The other humans had removed their helmets now, each displaying what Vextal's cultural database identified as grins. The expression was surprisingly unsettling on their predatory faces. "Very well," Vextal conceded, trying to maintain her composure. "Though I must warn you, The defense trial is extremely challenging. Many species with far more advanced technology have failed. Another human, Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, according to Vextel's display, stepped forward. That's why we're here, isn't it? To show what humans can do. Vextel's exoskeleton vibrated with concern. The trial tests a species' ability to defend a critical installation against overwhelming odds. It requires advanced tactical understanding, technological prowess, and when do we start? Chen's interruption carried that same undertone of amusement, but now Vextel's translator added a secondary tag: eagerness. The simulation chamber requires 2 standard hours to configure for your species parameters, Zinra offered, her scales still flickering with anxiety. Perfect, Chen replied. That gives us time for coffee and a quick briefing. She turned to her team. Rodriguez, break out the thermos. Patel, start running those scenarios we practiced. Zhang, check our gear loadouts. Jackson, see if you can get a look at their defense grid schematics. Legally, of course. The humans moved with disturbing efficiency, each acknowledging their orders with sharp nods before dispersing to their tasks. Vextel watched in growing unease as they began unpacking equipment that looked far too primitive for the challenges ahead. Administrator, Zinra whispered, her scales now a deep purple of concern. Should we perhaps suggest a lesser trial? The defense trial's failure rate for Category 4 species is 100%. Vextel finished. But would they accept a lesser challenge? They both watched as Commander Chen pulled out what appeared to be a simple thermal container, poured a dark liquid into small cups, and distributed them to her team. The humans' grins grew wider as they consumed the substance. No, Vextel decided. I don't believe they would. Alert the medical team to stand by. Something tells me we're about to witness either a spectacular failure or... She paused, all 4 eyes fixed on the humans as they began reviewing tactical displays on their primitive devices, their movements becoming increasingly animated. Or what, Administrator? Or something unprecedented? Vextel's atmospheric processors whirred as she watched Commander Chen sketch what appeared to be an attack plan on a physical piece of flexible cellulose. May the first ones help us all. The impossible test. The simulation chamber was a technological marvel, a massive spherical space where hard-like constructs and gravitational fields could recreate any battlefield scenario with perfect fidelity. Vextel watched from the control center as the human team examined their basic equipment loadouts. Final simulation parameters locked. Zinra announced, her scales now a professional shade of bronze. Standard defense trial. Difficulty level Omega. Target installation. Quantum communications hub. Enemy forces. 300 elite-class combat units with heavy support. Commander Chen's eyes narrowed as she studied the holographic overlay of the battlefield. The quantum hub sat atop a steep hill, surrounded by rocky terrain and sparse vegetation. Multiple approach vectors, minimal cover, and overwhelming odds. The scenario was designed to be impossible to win. Merely surviving for an hour was considered exceptional. Ma'am, Lieutenant Rodriguez called out, hefting what the facility scanners identified as a primitive projectile weapon. They've given us standard kinetic loadouts. No plasma weapons, no shield generators. As expected, Chen replied, checking her own weapon with practiced efficiency. We stick to the plan. Jackson, what did you find in those schematics? Their defensive protocols are interesting. Jackson's fingers danced over a datapad. They're expecting us to fortify the hub's upper levels. All their combat data shows previous species trying to hold the high ground. Of course they did, Paddle grinned, adjusting something in her pack that made Vextel's security sensors buzz with concern. That's because they think like prey. In the control center, Zinra's scales shifted to a confused yellow. Administrator, they appear to be treating this as an offensive scenario. Should we clarify the parameters? The parameters are clear, Vextel replied, though uncertainty crept into her voice. They are to defend the installation for as long as possible against superior forces. Their interpretation of those parameters is part of the test. The simulation crystallized around the human team, solid light and force fields creating a perfect replica of the battlefield. The quantum hub hummed behind them, its essential systems pulsing with artificial life. In the distance, the first wave of enemy forces began their approach. "Think we can beat the record?" Zhang asked, settling into what seemed like an intentionally exposed position. "Record?" Chen smiled, but there was something predatory in the expression that made Vextel's exoskeleton tingle. "We're going to break this simulation entirely. Patel, are you ready?" "Oh yes." Patel pulled out several devices that definitely weren't part of the standard loadout. "Remember when we studied their construction protocols? Every simulation they run uses the same basic architecture. I've got a few surprises planned." Vextel's upper eyes widened. "They can't possibly have." "Ma'am," Zinra interrupted, her scales flashing urgent purple. They're not deploying any defensive positions. They're splitting up. 3 teams, moving away from the installation." "That's suicide," Vextel breathed. "The scenario specifically requires them to think like humans would think." Chen's voice carried clearly through the command channel. "Rodriguez, Zhang, you're our thunder. Make it loud, make it proud. Jackson, Patel, with me. We're going hunting." What followed defied every tactical principle in the galactic database. Rodriguez and Zhang charged directly at the approaching enemy forces, firing their primitive weapons with seemingly reckless abandon. But their movements, Vextel's tactical processors struggled to track the way they used the terrain, appearing and disappearing, drawing enemy fire while somehow remaining unscathed. "Administrator." Zinra's scales were strobing with alarm. "The enemy AI is confused. It's diverting forces to chase the decoys, but their movement patterns don't match any known combat doctrine. The prediction algorithms are failing." Meanwhile, Chen's team had vanished completely. The simulation's sensors struggled to track them as they moved through spaces that should have been too small, too exposed, or too dangerous to traverse. They weren't just surviving. They were hunting the hunters. "Impossible," Vextel whispered as she watched Patel deploy her mysterious devices at key points around the battlefield. "They're not even trying to defend the installation. They're going to lose everything because they don't understand basic tactical." The first explosion cut off her words. Then another, and another. Strategic points across the battlefield erupted in carefully orchestrated chaos. Enemy units found their communications scrambled, their formation disrupted, their carefully programmed tactics rendered useless by an opponent that refused to behave according to any rational doctrine. "Administrator," Zinra's voice was barely a whisper, her scales now white with shock. They're not defending. They're conquering. They're taking control of the entire simulation space." Chen's voice crackled through the command channel again, that undertone of amusement now unmistakable. "Jackson, how's that remote override coming?" "Almost there, Commander. Turns out their security protocols never considered someone might try to hack the simulation itself. They assumed any species advanced enough to understand their code would be too civilized to try." Vextel's atmospheric processors nearly seized. "They can't. It's impossible. The simulation's core protocols err." The battlefield flickered, just for a moment. But in that moment, everything changed. The enemy forces froze, their programming suspended in an impossible state. The quantum hub's defenses, meant to be static elements of the scenario, suddenly came alive under human control. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chen announced, "the playground is ours. Rodriguez, Zhang. Time to show them why humans don't believe in impossible odds. Patel, light it up. All of it." The next 3 minutes would be studied by galactic tactical analysts for centuries to come. The human team didn't just survive. They systematically dismantled the entire scenario. Enemy forces found themselves caught between devastating crossfires, their superior numbers meaningless against opponents who turned the very architecture of the simulation against them. And through it all, Commander Chen's team moved with that same predatory grace, their actions coordinated with a precision that seemed to transcend their primitive technology. They weren't just soldiers following a plan. They were apex predators at work. Time. Chen called out as the last enemy unit fell. "How'd we do?" 11 minutes, 43 seconds, Jackson reported. A new record, I'd say. In the control center, Vextal and Zinra stared at their displays in stunned silence. The humans hadn't just survived the impossible scenario, they'd broken it completely, rewriting the rules of engagement in ways that would force the entire Galactic Council to reconsider their understanding of primitive species. Administrator. Zinra's scales had settled into a shade of blue that Vextal had never seen before. What do we do now? Vextal watched as the human team regrouped, their predatory grins still in place, their primitive weapons held with casual competence. Now we prepare to rewrite every evaluation protocol we have. Because something tells me this is just the beginning. Breaking every rule. The emergency council chamber materialized around Vextal as she stepped into the holographic meeting space. Representatives from 12 of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy appeared as shimmering avatars, their agitation evident even through the telepresence system. High Administrator, Supreme Counselor Koth's crystalline form, pulsed with barely contained energy, explain how a pre-FTL species managed to not just complete but fundamentally break our most challenging combat simulation. Before Vextal could respond, Commander Chen's voice cut through the chamber. "Why don't you ask us directly?" The human team strode into the holographic space, their casual confidence making several council members' avatars flicker with discomfort. "This is a closed session," Kivoth began, but Chen interrupted again. "No, it's not. According to Article 7 of your evaluation protocols, any species being assessed has the right to participate in discussions about their performance. We did our homework, Counselor." Vextal watched multiple council avatars shift through various shades of surprise and indignation. These humans didn't just break physical rules. They seemed pathologically incapable of following social ones as well. "Very well," Kivoth conceded. "Perhaps you can explain how you achieved the impossible." "Impossible." Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped forward, that unsettling human grin playing across his face. "All we did was solve the puzzle you gave us. We just didn't solve it the way you expected. By completely violating the parameters." Counselor Zexna's gaseous form swirled with agitation. The scenario was a defensive test. "With respect, Counselor," Paddle spoke up, pulling out one of her devices. "The parameters never actually specified that we had to stay defensive. They only required us to prevent the enemy from capturing the quantum hub. We prevented that quite effectively. By hacking our systems." Another counselor's avatar flared bright red. "Using primitive technology to compromise our advanced protocols." "Primitive?" Jackson laughed, the sound making several avatars recoil. "Your systems are incredibly advanced, but they all share one critical weakness. They assume everyone thinks the same way you do. You built incredible defenses against quantum intrusion, psychic interference, and nano-warfare, but simple physical access, social engineering. You barely considered them threats." Chen stepped to the center of the chamber. "You want to know how we did it? We thought like humans. While your people were measuring our technology level, our weapons capability, our ship designs, did any of you bother to study our history?" Silence fell across the chamber. Vextal's atmospheric processors whirred as she processed the implications. "Humans," Chen continued, "evolve as persistence predators. We didn't start with claws or armor or venom. We started with endurance, intelligence, and above all, adaptability. Every tool we've ever created, every victory we've ever achieved, came from turning apparent weaknesses into strengths." "Your simulation," Paddle added, holding up one of her devices, "runs on incredibly advanced quantum processors. but they're controlled by standard data protocols. We didn't need to hack your quantum systems. We just had to convince the regular computers running them to do what we wanted. Those explosions, Zinra spoke up, her scales shifting with curiosity. They weren't just random chaos, were they? Course not, Rodriguez grinned. Each one was precisely calculated to disrupt enemy formations, create advantageous terrain deformation, and most importantly, generate enough electromagnetic interference to mask our other activities. Other activities. Kavoth's avatar pulsed with concern, while Rodriguez and Zhang put on their spectacular-like show. Jackson explained, "We were accessing your system through maintenance protocols that hadn't been updated in centuries. Your security was focused on preventing high-level attacks. Nobody thought to check the basic diagnostic systems. But that's..." Kavoth paused, his crystalline form flickering with realization. "That's exactly how primitive species would think." "Exactly," Chen smiled. "You've spent so long advancing beyond your evolutionary origins that you've forgotten something crucial. Sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective. You expected us to try to match your level of technology. Instead, we used what we had in ways you never imagined." Vextal watched as understanding rippled through the council chamber. These humans hadn't just broken their simulation. They'd shattered fundamental assumptions about technological progression and species evaluation. "There's something else you should know," Chen added, her expression growing serious. "Everything we did in there. Those were basic training exercises. Things we teach our cadets. You haven't seen what humans can really do when we're pushed to our limits." The silence that followed was deafening. Vextal's sensors detected multiple council members' avatars registering stress patterns previously thought impossible for their species. "Are you threatening us?" Kavoth asked quietly. "Not at all," Chen replied with that predatory smile. "We're offering to help you, because if we could find these vulnerabilities this easily, imagine what other species might do with less constructive intentions." Patel stepped forward, offering her device to Vextal. "We've compiled a complete report on every security vulnerability we discovered, along with suggested fixes. Consider it a gesture of good faith." "And what do you want in return?" Vextal asked, accepting the device with cautious appendages. "Partnership," Chen stated simply. "Not as primitives to be tested, but as equals who might see things differently than you do." Sometimes the best view comes from the ground up. The council chamber erupted in overlapping discussions, arguments, and exclamations. But Vextal's attention remained fixed on the human team, particularly on their expressions. They weren't just confident, they were enjoying this. For the first time, she truly understood why humans had achieved so much with seemingly so little. They didn't just adapt to challenges, they relished them. They didn't just solve problems. They found joy in discovering new ways to solve them. And now, they were about to change the galaxy in ways no advanced simulation could have predicted. Rewriting the manual. 3 standard months after the humans rewrote the rules of the defense trial, the grand testing facility hummed with unprecedented activity. Vextal stood in her newly renovated command center, watching as mixed teams of humans and various alien species ran modified versions of combat scenarios. Administrator Zinra approached, her scales now permanently settled into a shade of analytical azure. "The latest results from program integration are remarkable." On multiple displays, Vextal could see the effects of what the humans called cross-species tactical evolution. A team of Arxian engineers was learning human parkour techniques, their traditionally cautious movements becoming more fluid and unpredictable. Meanwhile, human specialists were studying Arxian multidimensional thinking protocols, combining them with their own intuitive problem-solving methods. Commander Chen's latest report, Zinra continued, bringing up a holographic document. "She's requesting permission to implement Phase 3 of the training reforms." "Already?" Vextal's upper eyes blinked in surprise. Phase 2 was only initiated last week. The humans insist that rapid adaptation is crucial. As they say, you either evolve or dissolve. On the main training floor, Lieutenant Rodriguez was leading a session that would have been considered heretical just months ago. He had mixed teams of various species deliberately failing at tasks, teaching them how to learn from mistakes rather than avoid them entirely. Your antigrav systems are a crutch, his voice carried through the observation feeds. Yes, they're efficient. Yes, they're advanced. But what happens when they fail? Today, we're learning to fall. Because knowing how to fail safely means you can take bigger risks. In another chamber, Patel worked with a group of quantum engineers, showing them how to create basic mechanical backups for their most advanced systems. Technology should enhance your capabilities, she explained, not replace them. The most reliable tool is the one you understand completely. Administrator, Zinra's scales flickered with concern. The Council is demanding another progress update. They're particularly interested in the modifications to the evaluation protocols. Vextel brought up the new testing parameters on her display, where once they had rigid categories based purely on technological advancement, now there was a complex web of interconnected factors. Adaptability, resource utilization, creative problem solving, and perhaps most importantly, potential for growth. Show them this, Vextel decided, bringing up footage from that morning's exercises. A team of supposedly primitive Canadarians, guided by human instructors, had completed an advanced engineering challenge using nothing but basic tools and brilliant improvisation. The old protocols measured what species could do with advanced technology, she explained. The new ones measure what they can do without it, and how quickly they can adapt to having it. Jackson's voice cut through her thoughts as he led a cybersecurity seminar. Your quantum encryption is fantastic, he was saying to a group of advanced AI specialists. But you know what's even harder to hack? A human being's ability to spot things that just don't feel right. We're going to combine your digital defenses with good old-fashioned human intuition. In the medical bay, John worked with xenobiologists, sharing insights about human endurance. Our bodies aren't just survival machines, she explained while running on a high-gravity treadmill. They're adaptation engines. Every stress, every strain, every challenge. It's all data for improvement. Administrator, Zinra interrupted again. Commander Chen is requesting your presence in Training Room Alpha. She says it's time to show you something that will blow your mind. Vextel found Chen in a modified simulation chamber, surrounded by holographic displays of various species combat data. The human commander was grinning, that expression that still made Vextel's exoskeleton tingle with instinctive caution. Watch this, Chen said without preamble, activating a simulation. We've been analyzing how different species move, think, and fight. Now, we're teaching them to combine their natural advantages in ways nobody ever considered. The simulation showed a mixed species team moving through a complex battlefield. And Arxian used their anti-grav technology not to stay safely above the combat, but to perform impossible maneuvers that confused enemy targeting systems. A Canadarian's natural tunneling abilities were enhanced by human tactical positioning, turning simple escape routes into devastating ambush points. But this isn't just about combat, Chen continued, bringing up more displays. Every species has unique ways of solving problems. We're teaching them to stop trying to overcome their natural instincts and start enhancing them with technology instead. The Council won't like this, Vextel observed. They believe in clear progression paths, standardized advancement. The Council, Chen smiled, is about to learn the same lesson we taught your simulation. The universe doesn't care about your rules, it cares about results. As if to emphasize her point, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Zinra's scales flashed emergency crimson as she burst into the room. Administrator, we're detecting multiple unauthorized ships entering the system. They're using our own protocols against us. Chen's smile vanished, replaced by an expression Vextel had never seen before, pure predatory focus. How long until they reach the facility? 20 minutes at most. Our defenses were designed by people who think like them. Chen finished. Good thing we've been redesigning them to think like us. She hit her comm unit. All teams, this is Commander Chen. Remember all those scenarios we've been practicing. Time to show the galaxy what happens when you combine advanced technology with human ingenuity. Vextel watched as the facility transformed around them. Teams that had been training together for months moved with practiced precision, implementing strategies that would have been considered impossible just a short time ago. You planned for this, Vextel realized, watching Chen coordinate the facility's defense with terrifying efficiency. We plan for everything, Chen replied. That's what humans do. We imagine the worst that could happen, then figure out how to turn it into an advantage. She turned to Vextel, that predatory grin returning. Want to see how we handle real combat situations? For the first time in her long career, Vextel felt something new. Excitement. Yes, she decided. Show me everything. A new understanding. The incoming ships sliced through space with predatory grace, their formation perfect according to every tactical manual in the galaxy, which, as Commander Chen had taught her, made them perfectly predictable. Hostile fleet entering final approach vector. Zinra reported, her scales now a steady combat purple, a color she'd learned from the humans. They're using modified council encryption codes. Of course they are. Chen smiled, watching the tactical display. Pirates always go for the obvious advantage. Rodriguez is everyone in position. Teams are ready. Commander, the trap is set. The attackers had clearly studied the facility's standard defense protocols and were completely unprepared for what they actually faced. Instead of the expected static shield grid, they encountered seemingly random energy fluctuations. Rather than organized defense platforms, they found apparently chaotic clusters of small craft and debris. They're sending their first demand, Zinra announced. They're claiming to be a council inspection team. Standard pirate tactics, Jackson commented from his station. Use stolen credentials, act official, get close enough to deploy boarding teams. They've probably got a whole script ready. Let's skip to the fun part, Chen decided. Patel, show them our new welcome package. What followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. The pirates' perfect formation suddenly found itself navigating a battlefield that defied conventional physics. Debris clusters revealed themselves to be carefully positioned weapon platforms, their seemingly random placement now forming a deadly web of crossfire. But it was the combined species teams that truly demonstrated how much had changed. Arxian pilots, flying with human-inspired aggression, turned their antigrav systems into offensive weapons. Canadarian engineers, their natural tunneling instincts enhanced by technology, appeared and disappeared through the facility's structure in impossible ways. Enemy flagship is attempting to coordinate a response, Zinra reported, her scales flickering with barely contained excitement. Their tactical AI is confused. A's always are, Chen grinned. They can't handle chaos because they don't understand its patterns. Humans, on the other hand, she opened a general channel. All teams, execute Operation Avalanche. The battlefield exploded into controlled chaos. Every lesson, every innovation, every combination of species' natural abilities and advanced technology came together in a symphony of destruction. Pirates found their carefully planned attacks disrupted by strategies that no rational military doctrine would consider. Ma'am, Rodriguez called out, their formation is breaking. They're trying to retreat, but we planned for that too, Chen finished. Spring the trap. Hidden throughout the debris field, specially modified pods activated. Each contained a different species' unique contribution to the defense. Arxian gravity manipulators, Canadarian phase disruptors, and human-designed mechanical backup systems that no advanced species would have thought to include. The pirate fleet found itself caught in a web of overlapping effects. Ships that tried to escape through conventional means encountered unconventional obstacles. Those that attempted to force their way through discovered that brute force was exactly what the defenders had planned for. Enemy flagship is hailing us, Zinra announced. They're offering to surrender. Already, Chen looked almost disappointed. It's only been 10 minutes. Accept their surrender, but remind them, this was just our training facility's defense force. Imagine what they'll face if they run into our actual military. As the pirate crews were systematically detained and processed, Vextol found herself watching the aftermath with new understanding. Throughout the facility, mixed species teams were already analyzing the battle, identifying improvements, suggesting modifications, thinking like humans while retaining their own unique perspectives. Commander, she addressed Chen. I believe I finally understand what you meant about human adaptation. Oh, Chen raised an eyebrow, that familiar grin playing at her lips. Your greatest strength isn't your physical capabilities, or your tactical innovations, or even your ability to think unconventionally. Vextol explained. It's your ability to teach others to do the same. Close, Chen replied. Our greatest strength is understanding that everyone has something to teach, and everyone has something to learn. We didn't just change how your people think, you changed how we think too. Around them, the facility hummed with renewed purpose. Species that had once been categorized as primitive worked alongside advanced civilizations, each contributing unique perspectives and abilities. The rigid hierarchy of technological advancement had been replaced by a complex web of mutual growth and adaptation. The Council will want a full report, Zinra noted, her scales settling into a new color that seemed to combine multiple species' warning patterns. Give them one, Chen suggested, but make it a human-style report. Don't just tell them what happened. Show them what's possible when you stop categorizing species and start combining their strengths. Vextol's atmospheric processors whirred as she processed a new thought. You never intended to just pass our evaluation, did you? This whole time, you were evaluating us. Chen's smile widened. And now you're thinking like a human. The galaxy needed to evolve, and sometimes evolution needs a little push. We didn't come here to join your civilization. We came to help it grow. As if to emphasize her point, a group of mixed-species cadets passed by, arguing enthusiastically about combining Arxian quantum theory with human intuitive physics. Their discussion violated at least 12 traditional teaching protocols and would probably lead to another revolutionary breakthrough. So, Chen turned to Vextol, ready to help us rewrite the rest of the manual. Looking out at the transformed facility, at the impossible combinations of species and technologies, at the breaking of boundaries and the building of bridges, Vextol felt her own thoughts shifting into new patterns. Yes, she decided. After all, as you humans say, the only constant is change. Now you're getting it, Chen laughed. Welcome to the human way of thinking. Trust me, this is just the beginning. Around them, the grand testing facility, once a place of rigid evaluation and categorization, continued its transformation into something new, a crucible of innovation, where species learn not just from their successes, but from their failures, their differences, and most importantly, from each other. The galaxy would never be the same. And that, as the humans had taught them, was exactly the point.